Bienvenue au ministre de la Sécurité publique et aux nombreux fonctionnaires qui ont bien voulu se préparer et se présenter pour cette rencontre. Et j'invite dès maintenant le ministre à faire son intervention. Monsieur le ministre, bienvenue et à vous la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you.
May I just check the audio because I wasn't getting the interpretation.
Très bien. Alors faisons le test de l'interprétation.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Évidemment que tout fonctionne correctement. Est-ce que ça fonctionne pour vous? Très bien. À vous la parole.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good day, Chair.
Acknowledging that we're meeting on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Je vous remercie
Thank you for inviting me to speak today on Supplementary Estimates C.
I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce to the committee the new Commissioner of the Correctional Services of Canada, Talal Dakal Bab, who joins us here today. The safety and security of Canadians and everyone who lives here is a key priority of our government. Whether it be protecting our borders, preventing crime, securing our critical infrastructure, or giving law enforcement the tools they need, we're committed to doing all we can to keep Canadians safe. Parce que nous méritons tout.
That is because we all deserve to feel safe, secure, and free in our homes and communities.
C'est pourquoi notre gouvernement a investi.
That is why our government has and will continue to make targeted investments in programs and initiatives that advance public safety.
And its portfolio partners are seeking additional authorities through the Supplementary Estimate C to support its work. A key commitment in our border plan and in Budget 2025 is an increase to the number of RCMP officers with the hiring of 1,000 new personnel. These new personnel will keep our border, communities, and everyone who calls Canada home safe and secure. To that end, the Supplementary Estimates C contain support for those new resources. This funding will allow the RCMP to recruit and retain the personnel we need to strengthen their federal policing mandate. Another top priority of ours is ensuring that foreign interference and transnational repression has no place within our borders. The Foreign Influence Transparency and Accountability Act establishes an independent commissioner and a registry to help combat attempts at illegal and unlawful foreign influence. Anton Bogman's nomination for commissioner was recently approved by both houses, and authorities sought through Supplementary Estimate C will support this implementation once the act comes into force. And let me take this opportunity to thank my colleagues of all parties for ensuring the swift passage of Mr. Bogman's nomination through the House. Mr. Chair, we also know that transparency and oversight of the work of public safety in this portfolio is essential to ensuring that the public has trust in us and the work that we do. Increasing this transparency and oversight across all agencies has been an important commitment of our government. To support that work, we're seeking funding for national security and intelligence review requirements faced by public safety, CBSA, CSIS, and RCMP. We're also seeking funding to establish the Public Review and Complaints Commission that will review public complaints against the CBSA and RCMP. This independent body will provide external oversight for the agency and investigate complaints about officer conduct or systemic issues in a fair and transparent way. Additional funding requested by the Correctional Service of Canada will enable CSC to deliver on its public safety mandate and legislated requirements. Lastly, within the Supplementary Estimate C, we're also seeking funding to support RCMP and CBSA's initiatives to counter drug-impaired driving. Monsieur le Président, je crois que tous mes collègues conviennent que
Mr. Chair, I think that all of my colleagues here can agree that the safety and security of our country and communities are some of the greatest responsibilities we face as parliamentarians.
Encourage the committee to support additional authorities we're seeking, and I want to thank all the colleagues that are joined here in support of the work that we do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. We can now turn to Mr. Caputo for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you to you, Minister. Welcome, and I welcome all of the witnesses with a special welcome to Commissioner Daklabab. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Welcome to the table and welcome to your new role. Prime Minister Carney called China our greatest security threat during the last election, yet he signed a memorandum of understanding with respect to matters of intelligence. Canadians have not yet seen it. I asked for it roughly a month and a half ago. Where is it?
Thank you, Mr. Caputo, for that question. And let me acknowledge that I have addressed this issue on a number of occasions, but let me just repeat today that there is imperative for Canada to ensure that we meet countries where they're at, not where we want them to be.
Minister,
as a result,
Minister, with all due respect, I'm going to reclaim my time here. I'm not talking about meeting countries. Where is the memorandum? Why haven't we seen it? When will we get it?
So what I will say, Mr. Caputo, is that the memorandum of understanding was signed while the Prime Minister was in China. It was signed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. It was an understanding between our RCMP as well as...
Minister, I didn't ask what it was. I asked where it was. Where is it?
Well, if I may, Mr. Caputo, I'm going to ask the Commissioner to answer that question.
Asking you, the buck stops with you. You are the Minister of Public Safety. Where is it?
Well, Mr. Caputo, if I may suggest, the MOU involves the RCMP, and it was signed by Minister Anand on behalf of the Government of Canada, and I'd like to ask the Commissioner Duhem to answer that question.
If I'm not going to get an answer from you, the top person in this portfolio, if you don't know the answer, and that's no disrespect to the Commissioner of the RCMP, if you don't know the answer where an MOU is or when we might get it, I've got an issue with that, and I think Canadians will as well. Terrorists. I'm asking you a new question. I'm asking you a new question. Terrorists in the IRGC are roaming in Canada. There are far too many of them. You have deported one. That's it. Precise number. How many IRGC operatives do you know to be in Canada? Just the number.
At this point, we are tracking...
That's me. Don't worry about that.
Okay. Because... You only know 24.
Mr. Caputo, let me go on the record here because I don't think my mic was on.
You're tracking 24. That's what I heard.
So we're tracking 24 individuals who are deemed to be inadmissible, who are going through the process of being removed. One of them has a scheduled removal date. We have 6 that have voluntarily left. We have 1 that have already been removed. And the other 23, in fact, 24, will go through the process of being removed. We have due process.
Things from even constituents. I had a constituent of Persian heritage so worried that they approached me and emailed me with documents of this. So even then, I'm not sure you answered the question I asked. I didn't ask how many you're tracking. I asked how many IRGC operatives or related to the IRGC are in Canada. I just want the number, please.
So what I will say is, Mr. Caputo, there's a number of assessments we've done. So first, there were close to 18,000 files that we've reviewed for admissibility.
Minister, with all due respect, I didn't ask you about how many assessments you did.
Mr. Caputo, I think it's important that...
This is my time. The Liberals are going to rescue the Minister. That's great. You have time to think about this, Minister, now, about how many there are.
Mr. Caputo, I will unfortunately have to interrupt, and I will turn the point of order in a second. Now, as you noted, I was somewhat patient with the overlap of conversations, which was unfortunate to the interpreters and very unfortunate to those who needed translation to understand the flow of the conversation. So, having noticed that, I will most likely be more strict in conducting those conversations, and I will now turn to the point of order. Mr. Essasi.
Mr. Chair, it's really unbecoming of a member of this committee to ask a witness.
What is your point of order, MP Essasi?
My point of order is this is not the way to go about asking witnesses questions. And the member, Mr. Caputo, is fully aware of that. He has been around long enough. You cannot ask a person a question, and when they are attempting to respond comprehensively, to cut him off and not allow them to provide you the response. So,
on the same point of order, Mr. Chair.
That's complementary to what I just said. MP Caputo?
Yes, on the same point of order, it is unbecoming of a member of Parliament from the governing party to attempt to rescue the minister when they're not answering the questions. I didn't interrupt you, Mr. Asasi. I'd appreciate the same courtesy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we now have a clear invitation to be as serious and engaged and tough on questions as we need to be. At the same time, we need the conversations to be understandable and understood to everyone listening. So, MP Caputo, can I turn to the minister for the answer, or would you like to?
No, that's 2 minutes we'll never get back. But in that 2 minutes, Minister, I hope you were able to consult with officials and just give us a number. How many IRGC operatives or those related do you believe to be in Canada now? Not that you're looking at, not that you're scanning. How many are there?
Mr. Caputo, we are in the process of going through 24 individuals who are deemed to be members of the IRGC for removal.
Okay, I didn't ask you, this is the last time I'm going to ask this, I didn't ask you how many you are going through. I asked you how many of a terrorist regime. Iranians across this country have been subject to terrorism. I'm asking how many, just the number of IRGC terrorists are there in Canada? If you don't know, then please just say, I don't know.
Mr. Caputo, this is a very serious matter, and if you will permit me, I will give you the answer that I think Canadians deserve.
Give us a number.
So let me just say right now there's 24 individuals who have gone through an assessment and they've been deemed to be members of the IRGC. That is the position of the Government of Canada. We are in the process of removing them, Mr. Caputo.
Okay, Minister, I don't think I'm getting a serious
in terms
answer.
of the numbers.
Minister, how many people, last time you were here we learned that 32,000 people through CBSA had warrants for them, as in you didn't know where they were, a third of the city of Kamloops. What is that number today?
Well, that information, Mr. Caputo, is available online.
You're not going to tell us?
It's available online, Mr. Caputo.
Are you kidding me? No. It's okay.
I don't think there's anything funny here, Mr. Caputo.
Nor do I. Canadians, behold,
the president of CBSA.
Your public safety
I'm
minister.
sorry to interrupt again, but that's my unfortunate job. So we'll have to conduct this in a manner which is suitable to everyone understanding. And I will therefore need to turn, given the time is over, to turn to MP.
I actually have 15 more seconds by my watch.
I can give you 15 more seconds.
Thank you. Minister, Canadians are experiencing crime at an unprecedented level, and you just said, not my job to know, and for that, you should be ashamed. It is your job to know. The buck stops with you. That's my time.
Thank you, Mr. Caputo. Now, MP Akan for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's, again, a sad start for me to see this. Being respectful is a different thing, and asking straightforward questions is a different thing. And once again, we are seeing a very disrespectful start of this meeting. And finishing that 15 seconds with that comment will make definitely good clips for our colleague across the table. So, going back to Minister. I had the privilege of joining you and the members of this committee to witness the graduation of the officers in Class 25C of the CBSA, who will be stationed at the points of entry and facilities across our country. And once again, thank you very much for including the members of this committee and inviting us to that meaningful day. So graduation ceremonies like the one we attended symbolize the investments made by the CBSA instructors into training new officers, but also a reminder of the investments made by the department and the government to support the recruitment of the border agents. So now regarding to the recruitment of 1,000 new RCMP and 1,000 CBSA personnel to strengthen our border. Could you please speak to how this funding in the estimates will supplement these recruitment initiatives outlined by our government?
Thank you, Ms. Akan, and I want to just thank the members of the committee who were at the first graduation of CBSA several weeks ago, and I also note that on April the 2nd, we'll have the first cohort of canine units who are trained on fentanyl who will also be graduating along with other members of CBSA. I would like to invite President O'Gorman to maybe outline give a response to your question as well as Commissioner Duham.
It will go on. So in terms of the CBSA officers, we've hired 50, and we currently have 90 who are at the college, and hoping, God willing, that they all graduate. It's a tough curriculum, but they should graduate by June. And every cohort after that will have members who would be attributed to the 1,000 officers.
Thank you very much for your answers. So can you also explain, Minister, how this funding complements existing recruitment and the training programs already underway with the RCMP and CBSA?
Commissioner, do you want to answer this?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. And when you're looking at the Sub-C request for funding, it's really hitting three key areas: federal policing, when it comes to our investigative capability, cross-border criminal activity, and targeting clandestine laboratories and synthetic drugs. Drug-impaired driving enforcement, which the RCMP has the lead to train law enforcement from across the country, so keep them up to date, and the continuous training and certification of the individuals. And the last money that we'd ask for this Sub-C is really National Security Intelligence Review requirement, which the last two are recurrent funding that were always related to TB Sub. It's to have a proper team to respond to any NCCOP or NCIRA requests. And as for the 1,000, I can share with you that the budget for the RCMP it will be coming 1st of April, in which we've already planned a series of hiring for those 1,000 or the 750 police officers.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Also, this following question can be answered by Ms. O'Gorman and you, Commissioner. So will this funding be directed towards modernizing the training facilities, equipment, or technology to support increased frontline capacity for the agencies?
I can start. So part of the funding will be increasing the stipend that's available, and that will allow us to recruit a broader, diverse array of people into the college. It will also equip all of our new officers, and in tandem, we've received money through the border plan for significant new equipment, large-scale imaging, detector dog teams, handheld devices as well. So there will be equipment, large and small, in addition to the personal equipment that all new officers will receive.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, you are referring to the 1,000 new, correct? The budget for the 1,000 new?
The funding that will come to the agencies?
Yeah, so I guess I'd separate it in three different areas. One is investigative capability, which really touched on the national security, transnational organized crime, Arctic security, covert operations, our international footprint, as well as our technical capabilities. So that would be one tranche. The other one is really with regards to program training intake model, to look at a training unit for federal policing and applicant screening, because there is a considerable new amount of people coming through the process. And there's also funding for data digitalization for federal policing, which want to upgrade our current systems that we have in place to improve efficiencies.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Minister, you and many of my colleagues know that I use all the opportunity to go around the country and visit all law enforcement and do site visits with them. So I also had the opportunity to visit the Cornwall point of entry and understand the different operational needs that the frontline officers require when it comes to stopping smuggling on the border. So this includes the use of different equipment or specialized units to support investigations and operations, whether it's a tactical unit, K9 unit, or the surveillance unit. So regarding the allocation of funding, could you please speak to how these strategic investments will support personnel on our borders, in particular RCMP border integrity units in regions experiencing that cross-border smuggling and organized crime?
Unfortunately, we went over the time, MP Akansa would
That was a good
invite
question.
That was a great question. The time is not so great, so we'll have to find a way for you to get the proper answer from the department and the minister. Ce qui nous amène à passer la parole à la députée de Bellefeuille.
Which brings us to Ms. de Bellefeuille for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Minister for being with us. We're trying to understand the cuts. At the RCMP, you have a ministerial plan, which I've read, and 173,000 jobs are supposed to be cut because the auditor has seen the different difficulties the minister has to recruit. I'm not sure how you're going to be able to attain that goal of 1,000 border agents. You said on the 1,000 agents that you're going to recruit, you're going to be able to meet the needs that were signaled by the auditor. But those 1,000 agents need to be posted at the border. So are you telling me that that those 1,000 agents that I do not have faith that you will be able to recruit in the time targeted will be taken away from the border because the number one priority was supposed to be 1,000 agents for border security? So how do you explain your answer where you were saying to us that some of these will be sent to national police services or Indigenous regions? Microphone, please.
J'ai pas d'interprétation, Monsieur le Président.
I'm not receiving any interpretation.
Seconds.
Just want to clarify. So, with respect to the CBSA, there is a plan, and we can elaborate on the plan itself. People are already graduating from CBSA from RIGO, and they are going out into the community.
Monsieur le Ministre.
So with respect to the RCMP, there is a plan in place which is primarily for federal policing. So the 1,000 new RCMP officers are for federal policing, not necessarily for border control. They will undertake a range of functions.
Je m'excuse de vous interrompre parce que je veux juste comprendre.
Excuse me for interrupting you, but you said in response to the auditor's report that the 1,000 agents that you had asked the RCMP to recruit for border security could be used also in the provinces at the provincial policing level and for Indigenous policing. That's what you said, and we have proof that you said it. So are you telling me today that the 1,000 agents will be used for border safety? Because I am a member of parliament with a riding on the border, and I can tell you right now that there's a lack of resources for land, rail, and maritime borders. We have a shortage, and now you're saying that you will send those 1,000 agents into the provinces or Indigenous areas. That's what you said to the auditor. Is that true?
Sorry, I believe there's maybe some misunderstanding on this, and I'll be glad to clarify. So with respect to the 1,000 RCMP personnel, and I use the term personnel very deliberately, they are meant for federal policing. They're not for provincial or First Nations policing. They're strictly their mandate, the recruitment mandate, the $1.7 billion we received through Budget 2025 is for investment into what's called federal policing. That also includes border control. And the range of work includes cybersecurity, transnational organized crime, anti-terrorism, as well as issues of national security. So the investments and the commissioner can talk to you about the recruitment plan.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, but do you not find it strange that every time that you cut $130 million from the RCMP or all of these jobs, that they have a difficult time recruiting? That has been documented that they have a hard time recruiting. And now you're saying, no, well, they're still going to recruit those 1,000 personnel. So how can you give us any reassurance, Minister? I am a member of Parliament who's very active in border issues, and every day I bear witness to the lack of equipment and staff to ensure proper security of our borders. Is there anything you can say to reassure me? Because as it stands, I do not have faith in the RCMP's capacity for there to be 1,000 new trained officers for border safety.
I have every confidence, Madam. If you would like for me to ask the Commissioner to elaborate, I can. But let me just say that the 1,000 new RCMP personnel are strictly for the federal role of the RCMP, which would include border security as well. With respect to, as you're aware, the Financial Crime Agency of Canada will also be established this spring. About 150 individuals will be earmarked for that.
Je m'excuse, Monsieur le Ministre.
I beg your pardon, Minister. In French, you said including, and when we formally heard you say that the 1,000 RCMP agents would only be sent to the border. And now you're saying including they will be sent to the border. That is not quite the same thing. So I ask the question once again. Those 1,000 agents, will they be assigned, as it was announced in your plan on border safety, to the border and to border safety for land borders, ocean borders, and rail borders? Unfortunately, though the question was excellent, we're out of time. But the good news is there will be time to come back to that question. The minister will already have heard it, so he will be all the better prepared. That will bring us to Mr. Lloyd for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, and witnesses for being here. Minister, the declaration period for firearms owners is scheduled to end next week. So far, only 2.5% of the estimated 2 million affected firearms have been declared, and 98% of firearms owners haven't made a declaration. So if they're not declaring by next week, what's your plan, Minister?
So if you will recall, the number of prohibited firearms are far less than I think your number indicates. We have over 26,000 individuals representing over 2,000 firearms that have been declared, prohibited firearms that have been declared. And the plan we have is, as of March the 31st, the time to complete the enrollment will be done, and then the RCMP and other agencies will be available throughout the spring and the summer to do the collection.
So, Minister, you're saying that RCMP members, we just heard an Auditor General report saying we're short 3,400 members. We're dealing with a wave of violent crime across this country, and you're saying that your plan is over the spring and the summer to deploy RCMP officers to go door to door to firearms owners and seize their firearms?
So this is a voluntary program, Mr. Lloyd, as you're aware, and the RCMP resources and the resources we will use with law enforcement does not contemplate in any way using existing resources. These are additional resources, so these are those who are off duty, those who may be retired. Quebec, for example, SECU, for example, has their own mechanism, but let me be very clear, it is in no way to take away from existing police resources. The resources that we have available contemplate that individuals who are off duty, and I can ask if you want the Commissioner to comment on it, I can ask him to do that.
Minister, I just find that very concerning that we're going to be sending police officers door to door because, frankly, many police forces across the country are refusing to participate in your program. And I think they have very good reasons to not want to participate in this program. And putting people who are no longer serving as RCMP officers going door to door. Are you not concerned about this at all, Minister?
Well, I think you may not understand the full extent of the program, Mr. Lloyd. It's not a door-to-door program. It is a mobile collection will occur, so individuals will be bringing forth prohibited firearms.
The people that have declared, Minister?
There are people who've declared.
What about the people who haven't declared?
Well, the program that we have in place is voluntary, strictly voluntary, so they're not compelled to take part in the program, although compliance with the law is not voluntary. And that, as you're aware, as of October the 31st or 30th of this year, the amnesty that was extended expires.
So after that amnesty expires, what's your government's plan for those firearms owners that might still be in possession of these firearms?
Every police of jurisdiction will, as you're aware, need to enforce the law. Canada is a rule of law country, one that requires adherence to the law.
Minister, you know, a few years ago I had your predecessor, Minister Mendicino, here and I asked him if your government had conducted any studies to show that this firearm confiscation program would do anything to reduce crime in this country. At the time, they didn't have any studies. The government hadn't produced any papers or research to show that this would do anything to reduce crime. In fact, in a 2018 engagement paper, your own department stated that based on international experiences, that there was no evidence that this would reduce crime. Has your government produced any reports since then to show that this planned nearly $1 billion, possibly more, firearm confiscation will actually reduce crime?
As you're aware, the Mass Casualty Commission report called upon governments to
Same
ensure,
as the report, Minister.
Well, if I may just finish, Mr. Lord, I'm getting to your answer. Mass Casualty Commission
Anything
report,
other than the Mass Casualty report?
Well, there's also our experience in Australia. As you're aware, Australia, right after Bondi Beach, has embarked on a second round of compensation program. They've launched it recently. I've spoken to the minister myself.
Very different jurisdiction, Minister. But I will say it's interesting, that the PBO suggests that you're going to spend over $700 million on this gun confiscation. We see in your departmental reports that you're cutting $132 million from Correctional Services Canada. I've been told that most of that money is for reintegration and rehabilitation of criminals. Why are we spending nearly $1 billion to seize firearms from people who've never committed a crime? And we're cutting funding for programming. You had the Office of the Correctional Investigator resign in protest against your government, and now you're cutting the funding even further from people that are most at risk of committing crime in our communities. How can you justify that, Minister?
Again, another great question to which we will not be able to provide an answer as for now. MP SSE for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you also to the Minister for being here once again and providing very comprehensive responses to all the questions put to him. I wanted to follow up on the question that was asked of you, but unfortunately you were interrupted. I know you take the issue of IRGC individuals here on Canadian soil very seriously. You personally have told me that, and of course I hear about that issue quite a bit from my own constituents and other Iranian Canadians. So given that you are committed to doing a thorough job, could you kindly explain to us what your department is doing?
Thank you, Mr. Sassi. It's a very important question, and I think there's been some misconceptions on the work of the federal government vis-a-vis ensuring that we are void of IRGC members. First of all, Canada listed the IRGC as a terrorist entity in 2024. Canada has listed Iran as a state sponsor of terror. Over 500 individuals have been sanctioned and who are ineligible to come here. We have reviewed 17,800 applications for individuals who want to enter Canada, whether on a number of different streams. Based on that, 239 visas were disallowed for suspicion of membership in the IRGC. Within Canada, so those who are in Canada, there are 32 cases that we have thoroughly investigated. And it's very important to recognize that when somebody is alleged to be a member of a terrorist entity, we have due process, but we also have a legal standard that we have to abide by. So 32, based on the legal standard that's set by the Government of Canada, have been established as a member, or credible members of the IRGC, out of which 6 have left. So my previous number was 28, so now 6 have left and 1 have been removed. So we're in fact working with 23 individuals who are still in Canada that we are aggressively trying to remove. And make no mistake, every single individual who is a member of the IRGC in Canada will be removed.
So thank you for assuring everyone that you're moving aggressively on this issue. But it seems to me that the member opposite doesn't understand that there is due process and we live in a rule of law country. So how are things proceeding? Could you give us a sense as to where we're going to be pretty soon?
Sure. So we're tracking for one removal very shortly, but by all accounts that should be completed, barring any last-minute issues. The others are going through hearings, so they will go through Immigration Refugee Board hearings. In some cases, it may be an appeal to the federal court. But what I want to be very categorical about is that no one who's a member of the IRGC is entitled to be in Canada. They're inadmissible under Canadian law. And, whether it's one or whether it's, 23 or more, as some reports have falsely identified, the fact is we need to ensure that every single one who are credibly alleged to have been members, and in this case, credibly determined to be members of IRGC, will be removed. And that is the mandate that I have. That's the responsibility I have. That's the responsibility that President O'Gorman has. And I've talked to members of her team, and I know they're aggressively pursuing every avenue for those removals.
So it'd be fair to say, given everything that your department is doing, that also has a deterrent effect in the sense that anyone who was considering coming to Canada is no longer considering that option, I would hope.
There's two. And so one is, I think, outside of Canada who may be coming in. And of course, like in a moment where the conflict, is highlighted, there are dangers if people do choose to come to Canada or look at backdoor ways of coming here. And our message to them is, no, this is not a country that is open for you to come here. That's why we canceled 239 visas. We have a comprehensive security check before every visa or document is issued. But the other deterrence is, that's why we have 6 people who voluntarily left. So as the law was catching up, as our CBSA officials were aggressively pursuing the removal, individuals just essentially gave up and said, okay, we're leaving. And that is the second element of it. So even though only one formal removal, the other 6 essentially speak to a de facto removal.
Thank you, Minister. I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you, MP Sassi. Ma parole maintenant, Madame de Bellefeuille.
Ms. de Bellefeuille, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, we won't continue our conversation on the RCMP, but my question was so excellent, the chair himself even said so. I was wondering if you could write to the committee and send us a written answer regarding my question about the 1,000 agents who are supposed to be hired for border safety services and not for other things. I would like to ask you a question regarding the fact that a C-12 was passed, C-8 is being passed. There's another bill also that is giving a lot of authorities to the ministers and to the government. Some of these have implications for intrusions into personal privacy, and I'm very surprised, and I find it unacceptable that your government cut 15% of the budget from the only monitoring body to monitor compliance with the law. I find it unacceptable that out of the 15% is a high number, 2.7 million over 15 million. All of these analysts are being cut from the only entity whose number one priority is to monitor compliance with RCMP and CSIS following regulations and laws as they are supposed to. We need to ensure that these laws are respected. For me, this erodes my trust in your government because if I had been in your spot as the Minister of Public Safety, I would have advocated for more funding for that entity to make sure that the RCMP and CSIS are respecting the law. I am deeply disappointed that I have not heard you speak to that office at all. Even in C-22, they were not consulted, and that is very serious. Now, for my question, and it is regarding border agents. I never talk about 1,000 agents because we knew that it was going to be 800 agents who would receive full training for a border safety. 244 per year additional who would be trained per year, and you are already training 175. You will not be meeting your goal just with the Rigaud College. There are 2 cohorts who are supposed to begin training in Chediwak, And can you tell us if they have started training, and if not, why not? Ms. Bellefeuille, I'm sorry. It was a good question and an excellent comment, but unfortunately, we do not have enough time for the answer. Mr. Au, for 5 minutes, please.
Yes, Mr. Minister, I have questions for you. Now, my first question is, you keep talking about hiring 1,000 more RCMPs, but you just got the Auditor General's report saying that over the audit period, the RCMP hired 2,262 officers, but 2,200 left, so resulting in almost no net growth. And also in the last 6 months, actually saw a negative growth. So my question is, did the RCMP ever realize recruitment was not even keeping pace with attrition? And what corrective actions was taken at that moment?
Mr. Rao, thank you for the question, and this allows me to address the issues around the Auditor General's report. And let me just say that the recommendations made by the Auditor General, I had a chance to meet with her on Friday. The Commissioner has been working with her. The RCMP has accepted those recommendations. In fact, much of the work has already begun. Some of the lags occurred because of COVID. So if you look at the time period 2023 to 25, it was just post-COVID, and also some issues around policing around the world. So what I will say is that we're absolutely committed to implementing the contents and her recommendations. If you wish, I can ask the Commissioner to elaborate. But what I can also say is that we can do both. In fact, recruit more individuals to serve in the regular service, including contract and Indigenous policing, as well as to recruit directly for federal policing.
That leads to my second question. Now, in the opening remarks, you talk about trust and confidence of the public, in the system. And again, the Auditor General found that it's not only about shortage, it's all talks about the failure of the RCMP, even to determine how many officers it actually needs, and also have failure to set recruitment targets too low, and also miss its own hiring timelines in 97% of the cases. Now, how can Canadians have confidence in public safety when the RCMP cannot even plan or deliver the officers it knows it needs?
Let me just say that the RCMP is an independent agency of the government, and they report through public safety, and I have very limited direction in terms of operations. But what I can also say is that I have every confidence in the Commissioner, I have every confidence in the organization to ensure that recruitment and the commitments they made to the Auditor General and the commitments that have been made to me are fulfilled. We have the resources for an additional 1,000 RCMP officers for federal, or personnel rather, for federal policing. And that plan is something that I had direct oversight over, and I'm absolutely confident that they will be able to implement the recommendations that they have given me.
Mr. Minister, I take issue of the answer that you just gave, because you are the person responsible for overseeing the RCMP operation. And this problem is not new. It's been ongoing since 2018. So how would the government allow this to happen for this long? And how could you, as a minister, not take responsibility?
So what I will say is that if you look at the Auditor General's report, it does speak to, much of the time speaks to before I was minister. Since I became minister, I've been very aggressive in ensuring that we meet recruiting timelines, but also ensure that we recruit the right type of people. And it's a conversation I constantly have, not just with the RCMP, but with all of our agencies right here, including the parole board. Like, these are very live conversations that we have to ensure that the agencies that serve Canadians reflect Canadians, and it is an absolute priority of mine, not just in this portfolio, but also in the other portfolios I've served.
Okay. And I also find that the Auditor General's report is very interesting. It says that, so the applications are sitting for nearly 60 days, just waiting to be assigned to a recruiting analyst. And that 50% of those positions were vacant. So why are the very important positions needed to process applications sitting half empty while we face a national policing shortage?
There's definitely a disconnect, right? And I acknowledge the work of the Auditor General in recognizing the disconnect. There are 18,000 applicants since April 1st of 2025 that have applied to the RCMP to join the service. There are a number of very important hurdles that individuals need to go through, and I think one of the things that we will do is streamline that process and ensure that we have a 6-month window from recruitment from the time they apply to the time that they enter training.
Thank you, Minister.
And we will continue to work with the RCMP on those changes.
Thank you, MP Arm, and thank you, Minister. MP Polowski for 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Minister, glad to see you here. You probably can predict my questions. I always ask you the same ones. So in our budget of last fall, we state, as part of additional resources for Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA, announced on October 17, 2025, CBSA will work with Public Safety, Transport Canada, and Global Affairs Canada to identify additional ports for container import and export designation, particularly in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence region, like Quebec City and Hamilton. This will help catalyze private investment at ports and is essential to diversify our trade. So I know Madame de Bellefoy has this issue as well. We would like to see containers going through our ports. I personally represent Thunder Bay, which is part of this process. But I've heard from Picton, Windsor, Goderich, Hamilton, they're all at various stages in being ready. They want this. What's happened between the budget and now in terms of actually realizing this? And you're welcome to ask yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Pulaski. And let me just thank you for the advocacy. I know that Madame de Beaufeuille and I have had many conversations. In fact, I think we're having another one very soon. Look, they're all around Canada. There are a number of demands for ports of entry for CBSA's presence there. This reflects, I think, our overall frame of expanding trade over the next number of years, and really the demands and the opportunities, frankly, of increased trade that happens in our community, including Picton, including, there's a demand for Oshawa. I know Ms. Kirkland's aware of that. We just advanced on Hamilton, the Port of Hamilton, very recently. But I think it's important to understand also kind of the frame and the way we prioritize, and I'd like to ask President O'Gorman to maybe give us some insight into that.
Well, and I think it's just building on what the minister said. We took that direction in the budget quite seriously and are working very closely with our partners. I think what that reflected is it's not really a CBSA decision. We will go where the economy needs us to be. No question. We're in the ports now. As more ports come online, we will be there. It's the economics and the work that our colleagues in international trade are doing and transport are doing. They're working with stakeholders, looking at the ground and rail infrastructure and the highway infrastructure. So be assured, we are part of those discussions. We are on standby, and we will be part of the supply chain as we are now.
So I know who to advocate to. Who needs to convince you? You said trade. Which ministries are the pertinent ministries that we have to get on about this?
Well, just reflecting what was in the budget, Transport Canada, certainly in looking at the supply chain infrastructure, looking, like I said, at rail and road in addition to marine, and then our colleagues at Trade as they look at free trade agreements where the trade will flow from and into Canada and out of Canada, they have an important seat at the table as well.
You're ready to go or have started working towards having CBSA services in Hamilton already?
So the Hamilton decision was with regard to warehousing, and we have been working closely with the proponent there. So separate decision would be involved in the Hamilton port itself, but certainly that's part of the discussions. It can't be for the future of the Canadian economy that CBSA is a barrier. We are an enabler, and we need to be at the ports that are functioning, that are getting containerized cargo into their ports.
So we've heard about the shortages of RCMP officers. The CBC report came out today stating it looked like it was getting worse. I know we've put money towards 1,000 new officers for federal policing. I know in my riding and for Northern Ontario between White River and the Manitoba border used to have, I think, 25 RCMP officers. It's was down to 2.5. I understand after about a year of trying, they've increased it by 1. What further can we do? What other money is available towards addressing this backlog? And again, you're welcome to ask your staff.
Thank you, Mr. Pulaski. And look, I want to just add, I'll pass it to the Commissioner to respond to that.
So, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. When you're looking at additional funding, the RCMP's approach over the last, I'd say, 5 to 6 years when it comes to federal policing, we really looked at bringing the resources to address the key priorities in the different provinces. We saw that in Quebec when I was there several years ago, where we actually shut down several detachments to mobilize the resources in the largest centers, i.e. Montreal, Quebec, and alongside the border. If the threat intelligence picture dictates that we need to increase our footprint with the thousands, or I should say the 750 that are coming, that's something we can take into an assessment and consideration.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let me then move to MP Caputo.
Thank you, Minister. There's an offender by the surname of Ray. I'm sure you're familiar with this person. He was released on UTAs. Do you know what security level he's incarcerated at?
Not off the top, Mr. Caputo.
Okay. Can I ask, Minister, would you be okay as Minister if he were incarcerated in an environment without fences?
Sorry, beg your pardon?
As Minister, would you find it acceptable to learn that he was incarcerated in an environment that contained no fences? Would that be acceptable in your eyes?
So one of the things that we have, Mr. Caputo, is we have independent bodies that make those decisions. So in terms of classification of security levels, that is Correction Services of Canada. If it's an issue of parole, that is the Parole Board of Canada.
I do understand
These are questions that are devoid of ministerial, as you're aware, ministerial intervention. So I cannot direct either agency to.
You can actually have a review. If this was to be the case, if this person, this offender Ray, was housed without fences, would you initiate a review on learning that?
So, Mr. Caputo, I am not going to speculate, and I'm not going to give you responses to scenarios. What I will say is that if you have a particular concern, I will be more than willing to look at it, and I look forward to you, send me a letter or an email, or even talk to me, and I will be more than willing to have that conversation with you.
I'm going to continue from here. Thank you. So, Minister, your 2026-27 departmental plan lists community safety as a core responsibility. One of your targets being 4% or greater of the percentage of Canadians who think that crime in their neighborhood has decreased. It feels like that's an admission of failure of your government to address the community safety of Canadians. Perhaps it's a typo, but I'm going to dig deeper into this to find out. It feels like you have low confidence that most Canadians will not think that crime in their neighborhoods will decrease. So why have you set the benchmark at only 4%?
So what I will say is that, look, I go across Canada. I met so many police leaders, civic leaders, and the top line numbers on crime is actually trending down. So, for example, in the city of Toronto area I represent, homicides are down 50%. But the sense is the actual feeling of Canadians, the sentiments of Canadians vis-a-vis crime and public safety remains high, and that is what I think the role of public safety is, to ensure that there is greater confidence in our system overall.
So then would you say you feel comfortable with only 4% of Canadians feeling that their neighborhood crime has decreased? You're comfortable with that target?
I would say every Canadian should feel and has a right to feel safe in their communities.
So is that a yes or a no?
That is, my answer is that every Canadian has a right to feel safe and be safe in their communities.
Fair. Okay. I'm going to move on. Do you think that when a convicted first-degree murderer and child rapist that is supposed to be serving a life sentence is released into a community for 72 hours, unescorted, like in Oshawa recently, that it creates a loss of confidence in our government's ability to prioritize community safety?
So, and Ms. Kirkland, I appreciate the question that you asked with respect to this issue. And what I will say is that we have a system in place. We have the Parole Board of Canada who actually make those determinations. These are not political decisions, nor are they of public safety. They're made by
Excuse me to interrupt.
Experts.
I just want to check this. Was your office at all aware or briefed on the Oshawa case prior to it happening? Were you aware that it was going to happen?
I believe it may have been concurrent, so I believe they were maybe on the same day, or I did get some heads up. I think at the time this happened, and I was advised that it was the Durham Regional Police were very much
Durham Regional Police
involved.
issued a warning that we should watch our backs.
But
right?
I will clarify that, Ms. Kirkland, because been a number of weeks, and I will clarify.
Thank you. I would appreciate clarification on that. I've heard from hundreds of Oshawa residents, loved ones of Darren Pepin, who were outraged by the temporary unescorted release of first-degree murderer and child rapist Ray. Do you personally feel that those individuals had a right? Do they have a right to be outraged by his release?
Look, people have a right to feel safe in their community. And issues around public safety, when someone's rights are violated, and when a crime so heinous as what we saw with Mr. Ray, it does outrage.
So will you commit to reviewing it?
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt.
I will commit to getting back to you with the information, then I'll be more than willing to discuss what other options.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you, Ms. Kirkland. Thank you, Minister. We'll end with Monsieur Ramsey pour 5 minutes.
Mr. Ramsey, for 5 minutes, please.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the nomination of Mr. Decalbat. Félicitations. Minister, Canadians have heard what appears to be conflicting messages about the nature of foreign interference and transnational repression in Canada. Can you help us clarify what is happening and the roles and responsibilities of law enforcement and our security agencies?
Thank you, Dr. Ramsey. Very important question, and I may just ask Mr. Rogers, Director Rogers, and then Commissioner Duham, and then I will add my perspective.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for the question. Look, CSIS continues to be very concerned with issues of transnational repression and foreign interference generally in Canada. We continue to be very vigilant against those threats from many different countries, and our assessment of that has not changed substantially over time. That action on our part looks like, as we have said before, intelligence collection, sharing information with law enforcement, community engagement, and other types of action that could disrupt foreign interference. And for our part, we remain vigilant against all of those threats that we've previously described.
So, Mr. Chair, I will add to that. We work very closely with the service, and we have to understand there's two distinct mandates here when we're looking at foreign actor interference. We are aware of foreign states and engage in such activities in Canada. You saw the inquiry, the Justice Hogue Commission that looked into that. We saw my public statement in October 2024 of last year. What we're seeing from a foreign interference as well as a transnational repression is we're really seeing threats, intimidation, harassments. We're seeing physical and online violence and surveillance of communities, political dissidents and their families, and interference in Canada's democratic institution and electoral process, which we saw last time. It is something we take very seriously, and I did state at a media interviews that sometimes it can be challenging from a law enforcement perspective to bring the charges through the through the judicial process that exists, connecting a foreign entity in its involvement. But we work very closely with the service on that to reassure Canadians that information is shared, and we work as well with law enforcement across the country.
And if I may just add to this, and it's very important to recognize that there are a number of threats that we've faced over the years, foreign interference as well as transnational repression, has impacted many communities. And as I meet communities across Canada, I hear that, in different parts of the country. But one thing that I want to assure Canadians is that every single issue of foreign interference or transnational repression that involves another country is addressed, sometimes from bilateral channels, sometimes through the criminal justice system, and we have one particular case that's going through the courts in British Columbia as I speak. But it is absolutely critical that every single Canadian regardless of where they came from, regardless of other country in which they were born, is and should live in Canada free of intimidation of any foreign actors. And we're absolutely resolved in ensuring that those who seek to interfere or to repress Canadians who are outsiders, who are state actors or non-state actors, will be held to account.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Merci,
Thank you, Minister, and thank you to our committee member. This leads us to the end of this part of our meeting today. I think that all committee members will join me in sincerely thanking you for your time.
Okay. Like I said, we are going to switch over to the Environment Committee now, mostly because Franco, if you guys know him from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, is there. So I've already kind of skimmed it on my other monitor, and there's really only one time where he gets asked questions, and it's a Conservative round, obviously. So we'll listen to his opening statements, a couple Conservative rounds, and then we'll call it. So we can skip past the Liberal rounds because this was happening live as we were watching Gary. Let me turn up the volume.
On this challenge, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Bonin, pour votre.
Thank you, Mr. Bonin, for your trust and for nominating me.
To extend a very warm welcome to Will Greaves, who is now a member of this committee for the Liberal Party. Thank you, Will, for joining us. And also welcome to our witnesses. We are starting our industrial carbon study today, which is very exciting. And we have witnesses both hours. Do you have them here?
There we are.
These ones here. Yes. Okay. So welcome to Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director, and Nicolas Gagnon, Quebec Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Also, Tim Weiss, Senior Director of Industrial Decarbonization of the Pembina Institute, and Margareta Dovgal, Managing Director of Resource Works Society. So each witness organization will have 5 minutes to present their opening statements, and once that's complete, we'll have questions from committee members. Do we still have the timer?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll give you a 1 minute warning as you approach the end of your 5 minutes, and then when your time is up, is in front of you, just complete your sentence after that. So we will begin with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Is it Franco who is speaking? Mr. Terrazzano, the floor is yours.
Many Canadians are worried about paying their bills, buying groceries, and still having money left over to save for a rainy day. The last thing they need is their government making it more expensive to put gas in their car or food in their fridge. Many Canadians are feeling deep anxiety about losing their job. The last thing they need is their government pushing the company they work for to leave Canada for the United States. My name is Franco Terrazzano. I'm the Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and I'm here on behalf of hundreds of thousands of taxpayers with a simple message. It doesn't matter what label you slap on a carbon tax. Carbon taxes make life in Canada more expensive. Carbon taxes chase away Canadian jobs. And carbon taxes don't work. The government should end all carbon taxes for all the reasons it ended the consumer carbon tax. For years, politicians told Canadians that the consumer carbon tax made them richer. But nobody believed that because it wasn't true. Stats Canada showed that inflation dropped after the government cancelled its consumer carbon tax. Government MPs even shot videos in front of gas stations praising themselves after cutting a carbon tax that they charged for years. Leger polling shows that Canadians aren't buying that same government spin about the industrial carbon tax. About 70% of Canadians say businesses will pass on most or some of the costs of the industrial carbon tax to consumers. Canadians understand the simple reality. Carbon taxes on refineries make it more expensive to drive. Carbon taxes on fertilizer plants make it more expensive to eat. And carbon taxes on electricity make it more expensive to live. The consumer carbon tax didn't work, and a carbon tax on Canadian business won't either. Canadian governments impose carbon taxes on fertilizer, oil and gas, and steel. The U.S. government does not. If you chase a fertilizer plant out of Manitoba, that doesn't reduce emissions. It just means Canadian jobs go to North Dakota. If you chase an oil and gas project out of Alberta, that doesn't reduce emissions. It just means Canadian jobs go to Texas. And if you chase a steel plant out of Ontario, that doesn't reduce emissions either. It just means Canadian jobs go to Ohio. Canadians are already 10 out of 10 worried about tariffs and losing their own job. The last thing that they need to worry about is a tax from their own government that pushes the company they work for to move to the U.S. A trade union has already warned that the industrial carbon tax will decimate Hamilton and move steel production into the States and all the jobs that come with it. So there is no escaping the fatal flaw of carbon taxes, regardless of what you call that carbon tax. A carbon tax that makes life more expensive in Canada will not reduce emissions in places like China, India, Russia, or the United States. So a Canadian carbon tax won't fix the issue of global emissions. About 70% of countries do not impose national carbon taxes, according to the World Bank. But all Canadians really need to do to understand this fatal flaw of carbon taxes is look south to our biggest economic competitor. Regardless of who is in the White House, whether it's a Republican like Trump or Bush, or a Democrat like Biden or Obama, the White House is not imposing carbon taxes. Getting rid of the consumer carbon tax was only half the job. The government needs to end its hidden carbon taxes, including the industrial carbon tax, for the same reasons it needed to end the consumer carbon tax. Carbon taxes make life more expensive. Canadians didn't believe it when politicians told them carbon taxes make their life more affordable, and they don't believe it now. Carbon taxes don't work. Pushing Canadian entrepreneurs to cut production here and set up shop south of the border doesn't cut emissions. It just cuts Canadian jobs. The industrial carbon tax is the worst of all worlds. It's hidden. It makes life more expensive. It will cost Canadians their jobs. It needs to go. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to skip ahead.
Thank you for your testimony.
We're going to go to the first round of questioning.
On to
should be right around here
are built on assumptions that are fundamentally disconnected from how the industry actually operates and makes investment decisions. ECCC uses equilibrium goals that effectively assume that producers will continue investing in decarbonization past the point of profitability. That assumption may satisfy an academic framework, but it is a poor reflection of how capital allocation decisions are actually made. Companies do not invest to break even, they invest where they can earn competitive returns. And if the policy environment makes those returns unachievable, capital moves elsewhere. It doesn't just absorb the cost. This matters most for new facilities, not just existing ones. Commodity market.
Which is actually pretty right. Okay, here we go. First round.
Thank you. And thank you to the witnesses. Is my microphone on? Okay. Thank you for your testimony. I'd like to start with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Mr. Franco. And just curious, because you've brought forward, obviously, an opinion that we get pushback on a lot of times, and that's with respect to the industrial carbon price and its impact on food prices. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that, if you could, because this is something that's important to everyday Canadians.
Thank you so much, member. An industrial carbon tax really is the worst of all worlds. It's going to make life more expensive here in Canada. It's going to drive Canadian jobs south of the border, and it doesn't work. And, you know, for the better part of a decade, the government tried to convince Canadians that carbon taxes made them richer. Canadians didn't believe it then. They still don't believe it now, right? You look at polling, which shows that about 70% of Canadians understand that businesses aren't just going to eat the extra costs, right? Most or some of the cost is going to be passed on to consumers through higher prices. Very easy to understand. You impose massive taxes on oil and gas refineries. That makes it more expensive to drive. You impose taxes on fertilizer plants. That increased cost for farmers. It makes it more expensive to eat. You impose taxes on electricity. That makes it more expensive to live.
Here, and it's sort of in relation to the same kind of spin that we heard on the consumer carbon tax, that these revenues are being recycled back into the economy. In your opinion, do you think there's enough transparency around that?
Well, thank you so much for the question. Again, just like the consumer carbon tax, that's what the government tried to tell Canadians for the better part of a decade, right? Don't worry, we're going to take $20 from you and give you $50 back. But people didn't believe it then, and people don't believe that type of messaging now. Yes, government transparency is always important, but even better is that the government get rid of taxes that make life more expensive, that don't work, and that could very well cost many Canadians their job.
Thank you. And just a final question for you. If the current approach to industrial carbon tax doesn't change, what do you see as the long-term outcome and implications for Canadians?
I think life's going to get more expensive. I think Canadians who are already feeling deep anxiety about losing their job may see the plant that they work for get pushed to the United States. And regardless of who is in the White House, whether it's a Republican or it's a Democrat, the White House is not imposing carbon taxes. The vast majority of countries don't impose national carbon taxes. So a carbon tax in Canada, it doesn't work, and the government needs to end the consumer carbon tax for all the industrial carbon tax for all the reasons it ended the consumer carbon tax.
Much. I'd just like to direct my questions now at Margarita. And with respect to the natural resource sector, one of the things that comes up a lot in respect to this policy is carbon leakage. And I'm just wondering maybe if you could speak to that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. If you talk to oil and gas producers, it's no longer a theoretical. They see these regulations. I've looked at them. We're doing some research that we plan to publish, I think, mid-April, submit to this committee as well. And when they do the math, it's pretty sobering. So to put it in perspective, thermal producers that are using SAGD, steam-assisted gravity drainage, and that accounts for about 75 to 80% of production, in situ bitumen production in Canada. For those guys, with the current schedule that's been published, I have heard from a number that at a certain point it becomes more economically rational for them to turn off the steam, pull as much oil out as they can, as fast as possible while the reservoir is still hot, and then get out of Dodge, deploy that capital to a jurisdiction that doesn't have comparable carbon costs, which for the record is most jurisdictions. Most jurisdictions don't do what Canada's doing, certainly not energy producers. And the ones that I'm speaking of, these aren't marginal producers. These are, as we know, some of the lowest emissions intensity producers globally, and their liabilities are fully funded, so they can just get out whenever they want, and then we lose those jobs, we lose those opportunities, and those emissions, most crucially, do not stop. They just go somewhere else.
Into my next question with respect to investment and the implication on investment in Canada, which means Canadian jobs and growth in the natural resource sector. So ultimately, what does this mean for investment as we're trying to attract it? If you could just expand quickly on that.
Yeah, so most countries are assessing on a facility by facility level first their cumulative carbon cost. So they want to understand whatever framework they're operating in, what their costs are actually going to be, but they're also looking at it on a portfolio basis. So it's not just specific. Let's say there's a company who operates both in BC and Alberta. They have different calculations, different facilities, different sizes. Depends on the technology that they're using. Many companies in those cases are actively now identifying pathways, I've heard, to get out of Canada. So we're not going to be able to produce the oil and natural gas nearly at the scale that we want. We're going to lose the tax revenues, the royalties, the jobs, the direct and indirect jobs, the supply chain opportunities for Indigenous communities. All of these things are in jeopardy if we don't look seriously at what OBPS is scheduled already to accomplish if it's not fixed.
Thank you. And just another question. With respect to the policy, do you think, in your opinion, working in this sector, that the policy is proportionate to the environmental benefits that would be achieved through the government's plan?
Yeah, I think it's disproportionate, predominantly because if your objective is to decarbonize by deindustrializing, sure, the policy is going to be a success, and we're just going to lose that industry and that investment, and those emissions are going to go somewhere else. If your objective is to get the balance with the resources that we have, the assets that we have available to serve Canadians, then this policy is not actually accomplishing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anstey. We will now go to Monsieur Saint-Pierre pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît. La parole est à vous.
Mrs. Chair, congratulations on the new role, and I'm quite excited to participate in this study.
Okay,
it's been about 4 months in the waiting, so I think this is our...
And investment is, there's another really...
That versus how much they...
Right on to the
next conservative round.
Standard.
That's exclusively. I'm talking about Mr. Weiss, a question.
Sorry, guys.
Merci, Monsieur Bonin. We will move to Mr. Bexty. The floor is yours for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the first time. I appreciate your candor. Thank you, witnesses, for being here today. For Mr. Weiss, a question. Should projects using carbon capture and storage are implementing carbon capture and storage be charged carbon tax?
That's
on their operations? I mean, they're in the business of storing carbon,
right.
So is that kind of not?
Yeah, so that's fundamentally how the carbon system works. Is that when you
No, I'm sorry.
emissions,
Maybe I misread. Like Pathways, for example, they're in the business of storing carbon.
Yeah.
So they're injecting carbon into the ground. Should
Yeah.
they be charged carbon tax on their operations? Industrial carbon tax.
So any carbon that is sequestered, you basically get a credit for. You can actually sell it.
Oh, the credit side. No, I mean the upside operations, the upstream. Sorry, I'm not clear about this.
So I mean, the system is equal for everybody. So if you're storing 10% of your emissions, then you would get relief for what 10% of
So you're talking about the credits exclusively. I'm talking about the emissions as a part of.
Sure. So the emissions that are being emitted, then that are not being stored, then you would be priced on those as long as that is over your OBPS threshold. So if you're under it as a result of your carbon sequestration, you would be generating a credit.
Thank you, Ms. Dovgal. Could you speak a little bit about the carbon border adjustment? I mean, it's been mentioned a few times. You know, how much of our economy is exposed to that in reality? I mean, we are geographically attached to the United States. Forever, it's going to be our largest market.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think just high level. I'm not an expert in carbon border adjustments as an area, but what I understand and what experts I've consulted with and have spent time trying to understand their thinking on have told me is there is no, at present, market pricing in of carbon intensity. We're talking about policy tools on a national level for imports and exports, but at present, any emissions reductions that Canada or any energy producer does, the cost of that is not carried on to the consumer of the product. It's a cost that the producer has to bear. And I think that's important as a principle to keep in mind. I think generally border carbon adjustments they're a reality that Canadian exporters are ready for, and any policy mechanism, OBPS, in a good design does need to reflect that reality. We need to be compliant with, future EU, UK standards.
I'm getting at how much of our economy is going to be exposed to that versus how much of the economy is going to continue to be exposed to the United States where there is no carbon border adjustment.
I honestly can't speak to that.
Okay, thank you.
I can look into it and send you some details.
Appreciate that. Mr. Terzano. The government continues to claim that carbon pricing doesn't affect consumers and that large companies pay for everybody. But a recent poll commissioned by your organization found that 70% of Canadians believe the costs are passed on to them. How much money do you think actually gets pushed down cost to the consumer?
Well, it's actually the worst of all worlds, right? Because, and Canadians understand this, that businesses aren't just going to eat all these costs, right? They essentially have two things that they can do. One, raise prices, and Canadians understand that. The polling shows 70% of Canadians say businesses will pass on most or some of the cost of the industrial carbon tax to consumers through higher prices. But look, if these businesses aren't passing on these higher costs, there's another really bad thing that can happen, right? They could just cut production here in Canada and set up shop into the many countries that do not have national carbon taxes, including the United States. For example, fertilizer plants in Manitoba, they're being hit with carbon taxes. A fertilizer plant just south of the border in North Dakota, no carbon tax. Or, the government imposing carbon taxes on steel companies in Ontario, or versus the government in the U.S., in Ohio, where they're not hitting their steel producers with carbon taxes. So it's not just higher prices, that's a part of it. It's actually the worst of all worlds where there's higher prices and fewer jobs for Canadians.
We've also seen some information recently, 40% of the top 1% of earners are leaving Canada for greener pastures, right? How much of this phenomenon that we're discussing here do you think contributes to that?
Well, it's you keep taxing investment, and investment is going to leave, right? That is what happens. And carbon taxes, and we're talking about the industrial carbon tax. I'll add is that's not the only hidden carbon tax that this government is imposing. There's another tax through fuel regulations driving up the price of gasoline by about 7 cents per liter right now.
Do you have any data related to how the carbon tax trickles down, the industrial carbon tax trickles down through the economy?
That's something that actually we've been asking the government to provide.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Bexty. We will now move to Mr. Fanjoy. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Let me try and find the next con round.
There were surveys recently.
Reductions. How am I going to monitor?
That's Liberal.
As
Liberal. Oh, they suspended? Hold on, let me find it. Dun, 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 dun. That might have been the last con round, because we skipped through most of it at this point.
And that cost is sent back. Monsieur Gagnon.
Oh, here it is. So they gave it to a French MP. Okay.
Manitoba and south of the border to North Dakota.
Yeah, that was pretty much the last con round. Okay. I think we're going to call it here. I've got to go get some clips out on the channel from stuff that happened yesterday and today, obviously. So we can leave it here for today. House doesn't open till 2, obviously, on Wednesdays. You guys know that. So we won't be live until question period at 2. I'm anticipating Carney's going to show up because Carney only usually shows up on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. And he didn't show up today, so I'm assuming he's going to show up tomorrow. He hasn't released his itinerary yet for tomorrow, but I'm thinking it'll be a Pierre versus Carney day tomorrow. So, yeah. Yep. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in and watching, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of your evening, great rest of your day, and, yeah. Bye, guys. See you.